Kate excused herself from her partner, who was staring now at the stage, and made her way back toward Horst, first getting sidetracked by two Japanese dressed in tennis whites who were playing chess on a table they carried with them, one darting away after each move to pluck cigarette butts from the floor, and then by a man dressed as a carpenter who was balancing wooden planks on his shoulder. He was clearing a path, and all other avenues seemed blocked, so Kate followed him to a corner where a dozen freshly made coffins were stacked. He shrugged the wood from his shoulder, and Kate asked him if it wasn't a lot of work for a costume. "It's not a costume," he said, and took a plane from his denim apron and checked its edge with his thumb. "This is my workshop." It seemed absurd, but the wood, the tools, the line of coffins against the wall, they were all real. "You don't mind a dance here?" "No," he said, and bent with one eye closed to inspect his work. "I enjoy it, really. My job recently, it's all this." He gestured at the coffins. "I like to think of other things, too." She felt a sharp certainty that the patients they'd left behind in Vilno had been murdered, and she stepped away, back to the music, hoping to find Horst and wanting to leave. But she ran into a group of half a dozen men dressed as officers, and who bore themselves like real officers, backs rigidly straight, uniforms impeccably clean, all blind, traces of their wounds showing behind dark glasses. The next song, a waltz, set them moving, and she turned away so as not to stare, then laughed at herself and watched them. Shortly it became apparent that they were happy. They were smoking cigarettes, and in one case a real cigar, whose scent she found indescribably pleasing after the foul cabbage ones, and dancing beautifully whenever the string quartet played, seemingly untroubled by fears of running into others around them, twirling their partners expertly to the three-beat measures of Strauss and Mozart. And why shouldn't they be happy? Even if the war was still on in the East, it was no longer their war. They deserved some joy, a feeling that had seemed almost universal in the city after years of privation. She had much to learn from them. Horst was talking earnestly to an older woman wearing a top hat and little else. Kate caught his eye and took him away. After 2 dances, they sat to rest. "Oh, Horst," she said, and squeezed his hand. "It seems wicked to enjoy ourselves so much." "Yes, doesn't it? But you know," he said, "it's almost feverish, the feeling I have. My God, these Berliners, they know how to live." The music started again, and her sense of joy grew. What had restraint and discipline got them? Millions dead, millions of others' lives blighted. Just live. She decided to dance to every number, and when Horst grew tired and his legs stiff, she danced with the blind officers, one after the other in a blur. They laughed, they guided her expertly. They had a young woman smelling of eau de cologne in their arms, and if they couldn't see, it was perhaps all the better. She could be every woman they'd ever desired. As for herself, she strode among them, enjoying the reversal of roles, the ability to tap another woman on the shoulder, the woman wearing a papier-mâché raven head, the elderly one in the top hat, to choose her partner. After an hour, hot and out of breath, she decided to sit down again, but the quartet struck the quiet, rising opening notes of the Blue Danube Waltz, the calls of a distant horn answered by the same notes repeated more loudly on strings. And she remembered how, when she'd first heard it, she danced to it in her own room with only a hairbrush to hold as a partner. And then the glorious swirl of its theme began, and her feet were sliding across the sawdusted floor, circling around the axis of her tall, blind partner again and again. She wanted it not to end. The song flowed on like a river, passing in swirling majesty the rocky outcroppings along the banks near Vienna, rising and falling until it reached the tremulous bars of the pause near the end, where the music seemed about to stop while flowing on more quietly, nearly disappearing, and then growing gloriously loud again before its final complete stop left her breathless and thrilled and slightly bereft. She sat cooling herself by a drafty window, coat thrown open, listening to a man dressed as a palm tree going on about the joys and wonders of the Soviet Revolution. Food for every person in Russia every day, and real food, nothing ersatz. 2 other men stood by, one dressed as a boxer, the other wearing huge spectacles, the rims of which were 2 small toilet seats. The boxer said, "Just enough bread so no one forgets what it smells like." The second one said, "Yes, and with all the people they've killed, they have plenty for those few left." "Lies," the palm tree man said, "spread by your capitalist brothers." Suddenly, yet so slowly it seemed she could have reached out and stopped him, the boxer punched the palm tree in the nose, bloodying him. Kate ministered to him, tilting his head back to stop the flow, and wiping it dry with one of his green linen fronds. "Real blood," the boxer exclaimed, pointing with his padded thumb at spots on her uniform. "Nothing fake about that. Now you're going to win the contest." Someone came on stage and held up his arms for quiet, shouting that he had an announcement, and silence radiated out from the stage in waves. When at last it was quiet enough, he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid there's been a mistake. There will be no contest. We haven't a prize to offer." "Liar," the boxer said and pushed toward him. Infuriated, other members of the crowd began to scream and throw things, hats, a shoe, a hammer. The speaker ignored them and began reciting Heine's Lorelei. Kate left the palm tree man with his head tilted back and made her way toward Horst as someone broke a chair and threw a leg at the stage, and others began to swear at the poem reader. Then a giant man on stilts ducked into the room. His flat, level body stretched 5 or 6 feet above the floor, an outsized Jew with taped-on side curls and a ridiculous beard, his enormous old coat shiny with wear. The recitation stopped as the man on stilts made his rounds, swooping and darting, making the crowd ooh and ah as if at fireworks, looming over them all. Greedily, he sank his face into the punch bowl from a height of 10 feet in one dizzying lunge, then stood and moved off, picking up giant rag dolls from the corner of the room, 2 and 3 at a time, pretending to dance with them, and then throwing them into the crowd when he was done. Closer to Kate, he lifted the hems of women's dresses and stole a wallet from the coat pocket of a passed-out drunk, and people began to whisper as he stood swaying by the stage and holding up his arms. "Be calm," he said. "Everyone be calm. We do have prizes just outside. Stay here and I'll bring them back." He tucked himself in half and ducked through the opposite door, and people waited. 1 minute, 2, 3. Kate found herself unbearably excited. What was he going to bring? And when would he return? At last murmurs began. A man went after him and came back shouting, "He's gone." The crowd surged after him. Horst went too, and Kate followed. And just as she reached him, she was stopped by a heavy hand on her shoulder. "Wait, you two." It was the boxer holding a wooden crate. "You see," he said, "I told you, the winners." Inside was a large ball of butter surrounded by a dozen eggs nestled in straw. But why us? Why not? Horst took the box from him and held it as if it were a newborn, and Kate covered it with her coat. "So others don't see what's inside it," she said, angling him toward the street, "and so nothing breaks." All right.